Worship the King. That's hymn 219. Let's go ahead and stand together for that.
Established it fast by a changeless decree, and round it like a mantle the sea.
Please be seated. Let me reintroduce Pastor Reed Jones to you again this morning. Reed mentioned this morning his wife Kelly and his daughters Lucy, Jordan, and also the fact that he has been at Clemson for the past few years. Sometimes it's hard to know guys and trying to figure out their ministry. RUF is one of those ones that there's not quite anything like it in the rest of the PCA when we think about missions efforts. And I consider it a highly unenviable task. I'll tell you why, a number of reasons. First off, if you're Reed, you have the unenviable task of replacing two previous RUF campus ministers who were there from like 15 to 20 years each. And so right now, Reed is apparently in the third year of a 20-year contract. I don't know if he knew that when he stepped into it, but so third of 20 years right now. And these were two legendary guys that preceded him. And Clemson RUF has been one of the healthiest and most fruitful RUF campus ministries in the nation over the years. And it's because there's been a faithful gospel ministry that's been there in that time. Some of you, sometimes I get people that come to me and talk about high school ministry and student ministry, and they say, I just don't know how you can do that. But I think, man, this is so easy because I have these parents here at this church that make my job amazing. Reed's got kids coming from all over the country, and many of them not coming from PCA churches that land in RUF campus ministries. And he works with the kinds of issues with the mushiness of the undeveloped prefrontal cortex of college students. He works with them from all of these different parts of the world, and he loves it. He embraces that. And so this morning, Reed's going to come, and he's going to tell us, he's going to introduce you to the campus ministry at RUF, what he does there. And he's going to give you the privilege of, after 15 or 20 minutes, he's going to allow you to ask him some questions about it. And so if you want to ask a personal question, if you're Clark, you want to ask about Robert in front of everyone, you can certainly do that. But more likely just to understand the ministry better. So take advantage of Reed while he's with us this morning. Reed, thank you.
Thank you all. The only question I have for Robert is how can I have that hair? And enjoy it while you can, Robert Clark. Enjoy it while you can. All right. Thank you all for coming back. This is great. I do want to. I know there's such a spectrum of even understanding of what RUF is, and I mean that from I was involved in RUF and I've known it my whole life and my kids are involved to what are you talking about? And that's this room. And so I want to be able to help you understand what your ministry on the campus is. And I keep saying that. Often what I'll say at churches is that I don't consider myself a missionary of your church. I think that's the wrong list. I'm more of a ministry of your church. Like that would be the list that I would find myself on, because we really are your arm of ministry to college students at Clemson University, and that's true for Wofford, and it's true for, what are other schools around here that y'all support? Y'all support all of them, Anderson and Furman and all of these great universities. You have RUF there. So we're so thankful for your ministry on the campus. So let me tell you a little bit about what that ministry looks like. I would love a show of hands. How many of you were involved in RUF at a college when you were a student? I see a few hands. You guys can raise your hands now because you're involved now. Okay, that's good. That's helpful for me to understand. Scotty gave a little bit of the history at Clemson. It really is a unique one. RUF was founded in the 70s, and Clemson was one of the first campuses of RUF. So RUF is the denominational ministry of the PCA on college campuses. And David Sinclair went to Clemson as a student, went to seminary and came back and started RUF in 1984. And he started RUF at the same time John Hall, was a church planter, was planting Clemson Presbyterian Church. And so Clemson Pres and RUF started together in 83, 84, and has really grown up together. I mean, we are very much a part of Clemson Pres and a ministry on the campus through that local church. David was there for 14 years. There was a brief stint of a year in between David and the next guy where a guy named Bart Mosman filled in for a year. And then the second campus minister was Stephen Speaks. Stephen came out of David Sinclair's ministry at Clemson. He went to Clemson as well, went to seminary, came back as the campus minister. And Stephen was there for 19 years. He had 14 years and 19 years. And then Stephen left to pastor a church in Mississippi. Now he's in Florida. And then they hired me. I did not go to Clemson. I have never lived in South Carolina. I went to Troy University down in South Alabama. The closest I've ever been to Clemson was I knew some people in seminary who went to Clemson. And so I don't know why they hired me, but I'm glad they did. I was an RUF campus minister at the University of Alabama in Huntsville before I moved here. But I'm so thankful. So I really am the third RUF campus minister since 1984, which is amazing that there is this longevity on the campus. I did ask the committee, by the way, when they were interviewing me, do I have to commit to 25 years? Because that 14, 19, 25 seems to be the next commitment. I would be very old. Nevertheless, let me tell you a little bit about my background very shortly, how I got to Clemson. I'm from South Alabama. I was involved in campus ministry in college, not RUF. I was involved in another ministry that had a huge impact on my life. I became a Christian my freshman year of college, and I'm so thankful for campus ministries of all sorts, and really kind of felt a call to ministry sort of at the end of college, and had a really bad church background, some really difficult situations in my past regarding local church, and so I loved campus ministry, but I did not love the church. That was a distinction of mine in college. And at the end of college, I started going to this PCA church in Troy, Alabama, where the pastor really took me in, and Michael Alsop is his name, and he's a dear friend today. And he kind of began to mentor me, and he sort of came alongside me and said, I could see you going into full-time ministry. I think maybe there's some gifts there, but I would encourage you to just get a job first and be a part of our church, and let us come alongside you and help you, the elders in the church, come alongside you and help you process this call to ministry. And so Kelly and I, my wife, got married right out of college, and so I lived and worked. I was in marketing and graphic design for a few years in Troy, Alabama, and it was during those years that I began to love the church. So I loved campus ministry for a while, but not the church. And then I began to love the church, and I was like, campus ministry, that's, back in the day. And then I began to go to seminary. I went to seminary RTS in Charlotte. And I met RUF. I met RUF through Rod Mays. Many of you know. He was one of my professors. He's really one of the main reasons I'm in RUF now. I met RUF through former interns who were in seminary and all these students who had come through RUFs at all these colleges. And the way they talked about the church was so unique from what my experience had been in a campus ministry. And so I began to love the church during that phase of my life. And then I learned that you can love the campus and the church in this thing called RUF. And I loved that model. I loved that RUF sends ordained pastors to campuses. So when I graduated seminary, I didn't have a job with RUF. I was an assistant pastor at a church in Salt Lake City, Utah for a few years. And then I received a call to work with RUF in Huntsville, Alabama. So I've been in ministry full-time for the last, 11 years, but with RUF for 9 of those years. So that's how I got to Clemson, very roughly. the Lord has blessed that ministry on that campus, and I'm so thankful to be there. I get to see the fruit of that ministry through second-generation students. We have so many students whose parents met in RUF when they were students, and they have kids, and now their kids are in our ministries, and it's amazing. We do get to see students come from lots of different places all over the country to be involved in RUF. So what is RUF? And I really want to spend some time at the end answering whatever questions come to mind for you. But let me just share kind of an overview. What is RUF and what does it look like? And share a couple of stories of that. And then I'll open it up for questions. So what is RUF? There's a lot of possible answers. It really is the campus ministry of the PCA, which means we're an arm of the church on the campus. We think RUF is a place for our students to land and continue to grow in their faith. And when I say our students, I mean we are a place we want covenant children to come from churches who grow up in your church and come and be a part of our ministry on the campus. And we want to continue your ministry in their lives through RUF on the campus. But it's not just a place for covenant kids, of course. We want to reach the campus. And so we have students who come from lots of different churches and lots of different backgrounds and non-church backgrounds. And we want them to come and encounter Jesus, whether they have known him their whole lives or they've never met him once. And we try to provide opportunities for them to come to know Christ more. We're an evangelistic ministry on the campus. I think of there was a young lady who graduated a couple of years ago, Sabrina. She was our worship leader for 4 years. She was from California. She ended up at Clemson very randomly. She's in med school now, and she shared a testimony right at the end when she was graduating. We do a senior night. And she said, "I'd never heard the gospel until I came to RUF." That's the first thing she said. And I think about how that happens, and that's true. People come to RUF, and they come to campus, and they get to hear the gospel, and Stephen speaks, and so faithfully shared the gospel with this young lady. She came to know Christ when she was in college and grew throughout college and was one of our leaders at the end and our worship leader. And now she's in med school as a thriving Christian and going into the world. So that happens. The Lord draws people to himself through our ministries, and it's amazing. Another way to think about what is RUF is in the name. The name is very old. It's sort of clunky. It's hard to explain to students over a 1-minute virtual Zoom orientation, which we had to do over the summer. But it's Reformed University Fellowship. If you just think about those 3 words, it really does say a lot. I won't spend a lot of time, but we're reformed in our theology. We are reformed in what we are bringing to the campus in a biblical and reformed theology. We are university. We're Reformed University, so our place is on the campus. We are a ministry to the campus at the university, and we are a fellowship. Our goal is to connect students to one another and provide a place for community and growth while they are students. Another way to think about it is in our mission statement, our purpose statement, and this is what I'll just share a couple of stories how this fleshes itself out. But our purpose statement is simply this: we want to reach students for Christ and equip students to serve. Those 2 verbs are really important. We want to reach students for Christ, and we want to equip students to serve. So let me tell you just a couple of stories of what that's looked like, and then we can answer your questions. We reach students for Christ through sort of everything we do. We have a staff team. I'll start with that. We actually have the largest staff team that I've ever had. We have 5 full-time staff members this year, which is amazing. There's me. I'm in my 9th year with RUF. Jennifer Kent is campus staff. She's been with RUF for 7 years. We have 2 interns. One's in their 2nd year, one's in their 1st year. And then we have a new position that we just hired. It's actually, his name's Peter, and he just moved here last week. He's in a position called a campus ministry assistant. But basically, Peter just came out of seminary, and he's going to be working with me, kind of learning more about full-time ministry within our ministry. And then I'm going to help him move toward ordination and that sort of thing. So it's a new position, and I'm very excited about that. So we have 5 full-time staff members now. We get to divide and conquer and go out to the campus. We meet. Every job is a little bit different in who we meet with on the campus. But we have one-on-ones with students. We come alongside them and try to work through, as Scotty said, their brains forming while they're students. But also, as you know, college, I mean, they are working through some of the most difficult things they've ever faced, right? What they believe, who they are, identity issues, struggles, addictions of all sorts. And we come alongside them, have conversations, work through how Jesus can meet them in those places. We do that through small group ministry. This semester we have something like 25 small groups that meet during the week. Lots of them, and they're all actually small. We wanted to purposely make them smaller this semester so students could safely interact in a group of 4 to 6 students. Our staff leads some of those. We have student leaders who lead a lot of those. Those are Bible studies for the most part, small groups. And then we do it through what we call large group. We're not very fancy with our names, by the way. We do one-on-ones, we do small groups, we do large group. Large group is on Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock. We usually meet on campus, but this semester we're meeting outside at Clemson Pres on Tuesday nights. But large group is basically, it's a worship service where I teach through a series every semester. We have students who lead in music, and they do announcements about all the different fun events that are coming up. And then I go through a series every semester. This semester I'm doing our emotional life in the book of Psalms. So I'm just taking a different psalm every week and trying to apply it to our emotions. So that's what we do in sort of the framework of the week. But here's how God uses this sort of thing. I'll share the story about a girl named Emily. That's not her real name, but I'm going to call her Emily. Emily was a student who came out of state to Clemson a few years ago. She was in the band, and she was not a believer. She came from a really a hard family background. There were some abusive situations in her past, and she came in a very broken and struggling young woman. And Emily's roommate invited her to RUF. This roommate was planning to go to RUF because she grew up in a PCA church, and she wanted to invite her roommate. And so she invited her roommate. Emily struggles with a lot of social, I don't know if you would say a social disorder, but certainly some social anxiety. And so large group was very intimidating for her. I mean, there were like 200 or 300 students in one big room on campus, and it was a very difficult thing. But this roommate eventually introduced Emily to our staff member, Jen. And Jen reached out to Emily and said, hey, I would love to meet you for coffee or lunch sometime on campus if you'd like to do that. And so they began meeting, and Emily started sharing her story with Jen over the course of several weeks and months, and eventually they started reading scripture together. Jen had the idea to just go through the book of John with Emily on a week-by-week basis, and they just started reading through John. And at some point, her second year on campus, Emily told Jen, I think I'm a Christian. I believe this stuff. She's like, well, let's talk about that more. And Jen invited me into a conversation, and we explored, what does it mean to be a Christian? And at some point over those couple of years, Emily came to know Jesus and met him through the book of John, which Jen was simply reading through with her over those couple of years. And I had the privilege of baptizing Emily into Clemson Presbyterian Church last year. Now she has been involved in leadership. This year she's leading a Bible study. This is her senior year. She's leading a Bible study this semester. And she's actually interviewing to potentially go on staff with RUF, which is amazing. That's one story, one picture of how God uses these simple means of reaching out, inviting a roommate, inviting her to a large group. And God has drawn Emily into his kingdom. It's amazing. And it has been a privilege to see, even from the distance, in Jen's ministry. We have stuff like that happening all the time. And I'm so thankful for that. So thankful for the way the Lord uses the simple means of grace. That's reaching. So reaching students for Christ. Equipping students to serve. This looks like we have opportunities for students to grow in leadership. And what we really believe is that we are called as a ministry to help build the church long term. And our campus ministry is not just about campus ministry. Our campus ministry is about the church. And we want students to learn and grow in their gifts so that they can serve in the church for the rest of their lives. And so we offer opportunities for them to lead in things like the Bible studies, but also in planning events, hospitality, the whole spectrum of gifts that we want students to explore and use and grow in. And so we as a staff give them opportunities to do that in all sorts of different ways. And I'll just share one very simple story of what that looked like this week. I was meeting with one of our senior students, Mark. This is actually my fourth year on campus, and so Mark and I started together when he was a freshman. And we met Mark at orientation. He had never heard of RUF. He was looking into all these different campus ministries. He asked me 1,000 questions at the orientation table. I remember it so well because they were amazing questions. He asked, like, what is your ministry's relationship to the local church? And I thought, I've got a good answer for that one. And he asked, like, do you try to get students connected just to other students, or do you want them to connect to people outside of college as well? I was like, that's a great question. So I answered all of his questions. He ended up getting involved in RUF. He's been a key leader in our ministry for 4 years. I met with him just 2 days ago. We were catching up and just sort of said, tell me about your semester. How's it going? He's interviewing for jobs and looking into all these different things, and he's thinking about what church he will be in whatever city he's interviewing for a job in. And then he just started telling me about all these different guys that he's met this semester. He was telling me about 2 freshmen that he had met sort of randomly at RUF events, or he knew of a freshman who was coming in, and so he reached out to him to get coffee. He reached out to this other guy and took him to lunch. He had a cousin that he wanted to get involved in RUF, so he brought him to large group. He used to be a ministry team leader, which is one of our organizational functions, and now he's meeting with a new ministry team leader to help him grow into his role. And I'm like, that's happened in 4 years. This guy, he was the freshman 3 years ago, and now he's just going and reaching. Like, he's doing the equipping himself as a senior. And hopefully, we trust that Mark will take that into the church, right? That he will grow to serve in whatever local church God calls him to for the long haul. It's simple stuff, but the Lord is blessing it and using your ministry on the campus. The last thing I'll say, and then open up for questions, is this is a line that an old campus minister back in the day used to say all the time, and I just think it's so good. He said, when people would ask me, how's RUF going? Like when he was a campus minister, he said, when people would ask him, how's RUF going? He said, I would always answer them, ask me in 10 or 20 years, because that's when we'll know how RUF's going. He would say, because that's when we'll know what kind of mothers and fathers our students became, what kind of doctors and lawyers they are, what kind of churchmen they are. And he said, that's how you measure a ministry's effectiveness, it's in 10 or 20 years. And I think that's one of the privileges I have at being at a place like Clemson University, is I get to measure the ministry effectiveness by looking at you and learning of the stories of our alumni who are in churches all across the upstate, who are serving and leading, and the number of pastors and missionaries and Sunday school teachers, the number of very faithful nurses and teachers, educators, lawyers, doctors who have come through our ministry, and we trust that their lives have been shaped a little bit by how God's used this ministry in their lives. And so that's how RUF's going. Ask me in 10 or 20 years, and we'll really know. But we're thankful for your ministry with us on the campus. I know that's a lot, and I could say so much more, but I want to answer whatever questions you may have to help clarify a little bit more. So you've got to ask the questions, or y'all are going to have to go home and eat early. You don't want to do that? Yes, sir. This is my 9th year as a campus minister. Yeah, I think so. I think I have, but I've also worked only at public universities. So some people joke that Clemson's a Christian university. I don't get that joke. I don't see it at all. There has been a friendly history with campus ministries, but Clemson is a public university serving its own public goals, and it has been a friendly place for Christians. But I would say that relates more so to some of the churches perhaps our students are coming out of, rather than the feel of the campus itself. The campus itself, has all sorts of people from all sorts of different places with all sorts of views. But I will say at Clemson, I don't want to get into this too much, there has been a little bit of a push back against ministries since I've been there. So when I was hired 4 years ago, my understanding is that we would sort of be able to do whatever we want on the campus. I have found that to not be true. And in fact, they've changed Clemson University changed their policies regarding student groups a few years ago that really affected what we could do negatively in some ways. I won't get into all the long politics of it, but basically they restricted some of our reservation process and some of the things like that. I don't know where some of that's coming from. I can assume some things. Even we used to be considered as campus ministers, we would be affiliate staff at the university, so I would get a parking pass and an ID that I could use to get into places. They took all that away a couple years ago. It was in their reorganization. And so then they put me on the Interfaith Council, so I'm on Clemson University's Interfaith Council. which I thought would be a continuation of some of the things that we were doing before, but it has completely been hijacked by other agendas since I've been serving on that council. So there has been some changes, I would say, in general. Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, it's been a challenge. I've been doing campus ministry for a while now, and this is by far the most different it's looked, and by far the most challenging it's been to reach freshmen. Yeah, so at Clemson, I don't know if you're aware of kind of how the schedule went here, but at Clemson they started online for 4 weeks and then moved to in-person classes a few weeks ago. But even those in-person classes, like, how often are you guys on campus? Like 1 to 2 days, once a week, something like that. So they're even not on campus very much at all. Freshmen moved to campus 3 weeks ago, and they're in their dorms, but it's limited what they're able to do and build relationships. I sort of wondered, is this going to be the lost class for us? Like, are we going to be able to reach them? I won't bore you with all the details of all the things that we have tried over the last few months, but I will say the Lord has blessed that effort. We have been able to reach freshmen, mostly, which makes sense logically, it's mostly freshmen that are coming from churches that already have a connection to RUF, so they were looking for RUF already. It's harder to reach kind of that second phase right now because we don't have much of a presence on campus. But we started a freshman Bible study virtually 7 weeks ago. And so we had students coming on Wednesday nights from all over the country, literally all over the country, 7 weeks ago, having a freshman Bible study together. Then they moved to campus, and we saw an amazing thing happen. We had about, I don't know, maybe 30 to 40 freshmen who've gotten involved this year, which is great. I mean, I'm so thankful for that. They were on different screens on Zoom for the first 4 weeks. Then this week happened where they moved to campus, and they all got together, and they met outside of the amphitheater on campus. And so we saw their physically Zoom screens spread out to, like, now there's 1 or 2 screens that had several of them meeting together. So they actually worked to meet each other after those few weeks, and now we actually are able to do more things in person with them. So we're able to connect with some freshmen. But overall, to answer your question, I told somebody in the hallway this earlier, I'm pretty hopeful for this class, actually. I really am. I'm hopeful. I was really sad for this class in the spring and thinking, oh boy, how's this going to go? But I've met with clinicians and psychologists. I had a meeting when I was on the Interfaith Council last year with the head of counseling for Clemson University's Redfern and the director of the whole counseling center. And she said, this was right before COVID, she said, the number one thing that college students today struggle with is resiliency. That's what she said. She said they don't know how to adapt to changing situations and difficulties. And so that's the issues behind so much of the counseling that they were dealing with in the Redfern services. That makes me hopeful for this freshman class because they have been forced to grow up into very difficult ways. Like, I feel sad for them in some ways, but they are being forced to, like, work through and grow in resiliency. And we're seeing that. Like, we really are seeing them. I think there's going to be a totally different stage of maturity among this class of freshmen as they go through college. I really believe that over the next few years. And I'm excited to see how this class really impacts our ministry over the long haul. I don't know if that's helpful. That's a long, couple-sided answer. What time are we supposed to end, Scotty? Oh, okay. What other questions? Not that I'm aware of in the last few years at Clemson University. I will say this is not exactly the answer to your question. I will say there's another wing of RUF at Clemson, which is RUF International. Not that all students of other religions come from other countries. I don't mean to insinuate that. But we have another campus minister who's there now named Brian Howard. He just got there this year. He's following Rick Bronner, who was there for like 35 years as the RUFI campus minister. And I don't know if that's a ministry that y'all support or not. I hope that you would in the future support RUF International at Clemson, because get him to come do this next year. He's got amazing stories. Even already, he's been there for about 5 weeks, and he's in my office every week telling me, I just met with this guy from Pakistan, and here's what he was asking me. Like every week, that's what he's doing with his job. And it's amazing to see the long-term fruit of Rick Bronner's ministry at Clemson that literally is an international ministry. And now Brian Howard is there. But in terms of RUF, our RUF, I haven't seen that much as far as I know. Thank you. Yeah.
Reed, I'm always interested in the resources that college ministers are using to supplement Bible studies and help folks think through specific issues. When I was in college ministry, really popular stuff in the CCO was N.T. Wright, Tim Keller, Dan Allender, Trevor Longman, and other authors in that milieu. What resources are you all using, are you at Clemson, beyond just scripture and Bible studies to disciple students?
You're not asking because you sell resources, are you? Zach has a table in the back if anyone's interested. That's it. I don't know if this is oversimplification of your question. Our Bible studies are just Bible studies. Like, we just sort of write actual Bible studies for the most part. We let our small group leaders, if they have something that they're particularly interested in and enjoying right now. Like right now, one of our small groups is reading through Desiring God by John Piper as their small group. But for the most part, we're just writing Bible studies. Like, I will physically write new Bible studies for each semester, and I will go through those studies with our leaders to help them understand the passage and then take that to their groups. That's sort of our default. We don't really have any normal curriculum in the way that you're mentioning at this point. Good question. Maybe one more question? Well, we have answered them all. Isn't that something? I'm really glad. Well, thank y'all so much. I'm really glad to be with you all this morning. Thank you for your ministry with us on the campus. And on behalf of all the RUFs in our presbytery, all these campuses are run by other ordained ministers. And we're all so thankful that you would call us and have us on the campus serving as your missions and your ministries there. So thank y'all.
Reed, thank you so much for being with us and for that. Just remember, when you think about Reed, the value of momentum in ministry is that when you have something going, the ability to keep that going, to keep kids coming and gathering together and having that sense of this is just something we do. Because one of the things that's really been lost with students, and have heard this from people, is that they've returned to physical classes, but people are going, I don't have quite enough time to get over there for that. Maybe I'll just check in with the Zoom to the class instead of actually going physically to the class. And so it's just become normal not to meet together. And biblically as Christians, we know we're called to meet together, of course, for corporate worship, but we need that other times as well. So pray for the Lord's grace and for COVID being done and just kind of restored to normalcy so they can have that more of that one-on-one time and those group times where they're physically together, because that's important. And you know it. Let's go ahead and close out here. We're going to sing the last 3 stanzas of O Worship the King. And so if you want to pull that out, we'll pick up at the 4th stanza there. And that's page 219 in your hymnals. We'll stand together and sing, and I'll close this in prayer. Almighty God, thank you for this morning, this day. Set it apart for your worship because you are worthy. Pray that our hearts will be instructed, that we will love your kingdom and be moved to seek it more. Pray for Reed and all those working with him at Clemson RUF and all of our other campus ministers, that you'll give them a great measure of your Spirit to be strong and to be bold and to be confident and to be faithful in these times, ministering to our covenant youth and to the lost who need the gospel. Pray that you'll give us rest this day as we come back tonight for worship, that we will be strengthened in our hearts and refreshed to hear again your word. And we pray this in Christ's name. Amen. All right, we'll see you back at 4 p.m. or 6 p.m. Don't forget your children if you left them down the hallway.